Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Bardcast. I'm Chris, I play Coriakin, and with me as always is...
Semi, and I play as Bingro.
And we're very happy to have you with us today. Sometimes we talk about a particular aspect of music or writing, but today we want to take things in a bit more of a general direction and do something that's fun for us, which is we've each picked a piece that we want the other person to not exactly analyze, but take a look through and see if we can figure out what each other were thinking when we wrote it. There will be a little bit of analysis, but a lot of it is sort of on mindset, how we made our decisions, and what effect we were hoping to have. Anything you want to add to that?
I'm really looking forward to that because the last episode when we talked about our pieces was one of my personal favorites so far. And I think that's something we should do more often, and I guess we will do more often. And I think that's something where we have the general approach and talk about music in general and what we thought and what we felt and what it makes other people feel. I think that's the kind of stuff that's the core of music in the end.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Well, why don't we get started? So each of us has chosen a piece for the other person to play or to look through, and you've chosen your piece, Falling for the Fallen, which was written for that, I don't even know what to call it, like a artistic festival thing where we got a bunch of people to write lyrics and then bards chose lyrics to write music to. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think we called it the Fall Festival back then.
It sounds like something
because it was fall, and I don't know how to pronounce his name, but Maeght, Matt, took a different approach and interpreted fall a bit differently from what the meaning was intentionally. And yeah, I think the autumn was the intent, and he ended up interpreting it differently.
Mm-hmm.
So that was what made me choose this particular piece.
Awesome.
His lyrics.
So I'll just go through the lyrics quickly before we actually play the music, if you'd like.
Yes, please. Because this time I haven't sung it. I wanted to, but the time...
Mm-hmm. No problem at all. So let's see. The poem by... Yeah, I don't know how to pronounce his name either. Maeght? M-A-E-G-H-T, I believe. Anyway, Here we go. It's Falling for the Fallen. Fell beasts fell them. Messages of the fallen falling on my ears. I must not fail. Even if I am a fool, I must not fail. A job better suited for a wielder of the Fe-ell, so I fly to the cloud to fall for the fallen, but not to fall or fail. Landing health fallen, but not fallen yet. Though fallen, I feel their tugs, spirit not fallen, shield stone not fallen. Fallen found, healer not. Shield stone falls. Time for me to fall, but not fail. Falling for the fallen. That's really interesting. I like that one. I hadn't actually thought about, it took me several listens through this before I realized that he meant actually, jumping off the cloud and literally falling.
Yeah. Maybe one small disclaimer. I changed his words at one point. The repetition of I must not fail is a stylistic thing that I added.
Ah, okay. I really like that. I have to admit, when I chose lyrics as well, I changed Kani's words just a little bit, and then I changed Inu's words quite a fair amount. But, you gotta adjust things to fit your own artistic vision, too.
Yeah, I wanted to emphasize that, and that was an easy way to go.
All right. Well, let's take a second to listen to it. So I'm pretty sure when you wrote it, the vibra is playing all accompaniment parts, and then all of the lyrics are in the flute. Is that right?
That is correct.
All right, so let's take a listen. Here we go.
we go.
What a fun piece. I really like that.
Yeah, I think it is one of my earlier works, so it's been a while. But luckily I found my notes from 2021 when I wrote that.
Oh, interesting. I'm interested to hear what you were thinking when you did it, or what some of your earlier things were.
It was interesting for me as well, because I forgot some of the things I was thinking and revisited that when I prepared this episode. So
cool. All right.
That was cool.
Well, let me just go through some of the things that I noticed, and then you can let me know if I'm totally off the base or if I'm...
Usually you're not.
Okay. So the first thing that jumped out at me is that this piece is really, really centered around the lyrics. It's more or less through composed. For anyone who doesn't know, that means that as opposed to having a set structure where sections repeat, he's very free to do whatever the heck he wants to. And there's just a couple of times you repeat things, especially that callback at the end is a really nice touch. But rather than following the set structure, it feels like what you're doing really is trying to is really trying to accentuate the lyrics, try to bring out the meaning, and also to add a bit of your own meaning to what's there. Is that correct?
That is correct. My personal view when I wrote that was that the underlying topic of this piece was overcoming self-doubt. And I wanted to show this self-doubt by fragmenting the single pieces, or the single lines of this poem. And that is why I chose to have every single line follow the meaning of the words rather than an overall structure.
Interesting. That's actually something I noticed as well, which I guess, if you don't mind, let me get into it then.
Sure.
So the first thing that jumped out at me was actually this fragmentation that you're talking about. Like right at the very beginning, we have this nice vibra intro. But of course, I'm just going to skip past it. So you have falling, just that one word, and then there's actually a pause before you even finish that one sentence or the one thought. Let me see if I can just skip ahead right to the beginning of that. For the fallen, you take a little break between there, and there's just this sense of loneliness almost, like the melody is alone, but then there's these huge block chords come in that are so powerful. It really gives a sense of one person standing against insurmountable odds. And maybe I'm going too far, but that's the general idea I was thinking of. So let's see. Moving on from that. So falling for the fallen. Fell beasts fell them leads into this slightly more active accompaniment here. It's starting to build up the energy, it's starting to build up the tension, but also I love the fact that there's this little tiny bit of word painting in there where, fell beasts fell them, they're falling, the downward melody. Again, nice touch there.
Yeah, that is something I think I did throughout the whole piece.
Mm-hmm.
Just when falling, or when we're talking about fall, I think it is almost every time it's a downward direction.
Yep. The fancy music word for that is contour, as in does the melody sort of go up or down in terms of if you were to look at it on a page. Anyway, carrying on. Sorry, go ahead. Mm-hmm.
It's something different in German. So I think it's Katabasis in German.
Oh, interesting. Cool. All right, here we go. Fell beasts fell them. Messages. And there you go again, yep. So messages of the falling, and then, or the fallen, falling on my ears is again downwards, just like you were talking about. So, and then after that again, you have this pause. There's each individual line is sort of broken apart. It's fragmented in a way that's unsettling, which is perfect for the piece. Oh, then here's my favorite part. I must not fail. It's just this tiny little statement that the person is making to themselves. Oh, I love that. But then,
yeah, and there's the self-doubt. This is the first time when we really feel or start to feel that there's something wrong.
Mm.
There is no accompaniment during this part, so the lyrical self is really alone and by himself or herself.
Yeah. That's actually a technique I've used in a piece of mine, which I don't think has actually ever made it to Clanlord. It was written for a live performer to play, and at one point where it's the big dramatic like emotional climax of the piece, the company cuts out and the person just says one thing, one little sentence to himself, because again it's that sense of like self-doubt of being like, no, I don't know if I'll make it or not. But then let's go back to your piece, because after this first I must not fail, and then the next part is, even if I am a fool, I believe. And then the second I must not fail almost has a bit more of that resolve that you were talking about there. Oh, and it's very, very satisfying. It's very satisfying.
Yeah, and making it in a higher octave and repeating this line should highlight that there is no other option than to succeed. Mm-hmm. You have to make this right. You cannot fail. There is no other option.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And then that second statement, or an oath, or whatever you want to call it, a vow, leads to this increase in terms of the activity and the accompaniment, building up action, building up tension, building up movement. So let's take a listen to how it goes, because this part I wanted to ask you about. So let's take a second to listen to it. So it's... Sorry, I love the little like hint of the melody there before we actually get it. Anyway, so I'm intrigued by this, because you have this switch up to the major key for this point, where this person's still kind of filled with self-doubt. I'm not the right person for this job. It'd be better for a champion, a wielder of the Fe-ell blade. So, but you have this build up to this statement. So what made you choose to do that?
Word painting. The idea behind that, when I wrote that, was the lyrical self leaves the real world and comes into a state of glorification, dreaming, thinking of the champions, who are those glorious knights who are so much better than this person itself is. So the upwards chord progression indicates that we get into this state of glorification and we leave the real world, and then we're in major, and we're talking about those great fighters who are so much stronger and should be, or are so much better to do this job, but they're not there.
Oh, interesting.
So that is why I went into the major part. That is something that certainly isn't easy to hear or easy to interpret. But those were my thoughts when I wrote that.
That's interesting, because again, like thinking about it, stepping out of the lyrics for a second, thinking about it musically, it provides a really good contrast to what's happened before. If something is too samey the whole way through, it can work if you're trying to do something that's sort of, I don't want to use like trance as in dance music, but sort of trance like where you're trying to get people into a state and leave them there. But most of the time with music, you want to have some contrast, which accentuates the different things you're doing. And in this case, the switch to the major really makes it so much more powerful when you switch back to that minor, even diminished part coming up. So that's really interesting. So you were writing that with the thought of, this isn't so much about the person themselves, but what they're dreaming about. That's really cool. I like that.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So, a job better suited for a wielder of the Fe-ell. Let's see. And then next is, so I fly to the cloud to fall for the fallen. Oh, and again, it's still major. So I fly to the cloud. Yep, look at me. I'm taking part in this. This is happening. Okay. But then... we're back to the minor because this person is coming into the sense of reality. Like, oh no, I'm actually jumping off this thing. It's gonna hurt. All right, let's see what happens. So, to fall for the fallen. Next part, and then you actually repeat it, but not to fall or fail. And again, it's the same melody. And then again, same melody again. Landing, health fallen. So again, it's all the same thing, same mood, and then it creates a sense of anticipation, of tension. We're repeating it. Are we going to repeat it again? But no, we finally move away because I'm not fallen yet. But not fallen yet. Not fallen yet. And then you get into the sort of like the big dramatic part where this person's sort of in their, I guess, the main part of their adventure, if you want to call it. So, though fallen, I feel their tugs. Spirit not fallen, shieldstone not fallen. Let's see what happens. So I'm actually a little confused here. Can you tell me when it gets to fallen found? I get a little bit lost in your melody here.
Can you play it again?
Absolutely.
I'll try to.
So we're starting from about here.
Shieldstone not fallen. Okay. Fallen found. Healer not.
Okay.
And then shieldstone falls.
Okay. Sorry.
Not. Oh,
sorry. Can you do just this part? Sorry. So it's this part. Sorry. Can you do just that part? Sorry.
Yeah. Fallen found he not.
Oh, I see. So you actually break up between healer. Okay. Of course, because healer, pause. No healer. Okay, I got you. That's what it was. Clever.
Yeah, I see that this is confusing.
Well, we're trapped by the limitations of our medium. You can't actually you can't actually sing the words in the game, so you have to make it a little bit obvious. Or in this case, we're explaining it to people. But again, like the pause between healer and not makes perfect sense now that you've explained it, of course. And then moving on, we have to healer not, and then. Shieldstone falls, and then time for me to fall but not fail. And then, of course, we have this long pause in which hopefully Inu or someone will clap, and then, this just so satisfying. Exactly what I was hoping for the very first time I heard this, and you did it. Falling comes back. The initial melody comes back at the end. Yeah, I really like.
And a fly away ending.
Of course.
For those who did that episode.
Nice callback. Yeah, I really like this in general. Like really, really good word painting here. It would be interesting to see what you would do if you were to make it a trio with another instrument. But I almost wonder if it's not really necessary because everything you do here really supports it, and adding more might actually detract. Sometimes less is more.
Yes, sometimes there are good reasons to not choose a third instrument. And this time, I think it was due to two factors. One is me being very inexperienced writing with multiple instruments.
Mm-hmm.
The other one certainly is there are moments where it is better that there is only very limited accompaniment.
Mm-hmm.
And the sense of being alone in this task is something that could be lost when using more instruments or one more instrument.
I agree. By the way, for anyone who doesn't know anything about the technical aspect of being a bard and clanlord, when you're writing for multiple instruments at once, the way the game looks at it is that they're all entirely separate pieces that you just play at the same time, and they just happen to line up properly. So writing for more than one instrument makes things really, really complicated. You have to keep track of things. It's basically It's a lot like coding in some ways, but anyway. The point is it makes perfect sense to want to do less, especially for one of your first duets or trios.
And in this case, having this fragmented style, there was no. I couldn't count the length of the notes because I was shifting with those as well. So adding another instrument would mean I'd have to write the music from the very core and until the very end, and always reiterate: does it work? Doesn't it work? Because there is no. I have 4/4, and I go with that through until the very end. But I changed that, and I use different styles of the time. The pauses have different lengths between the lines, and that would make things even more complicated than usually.
Yeah, I mean, I was importing MIDI files into my music editing program, and it took me longer than I'd care to admit to actually get everything lined up so it sounded properly. There's lots going on in this piece. It's not straightforward, even if you're looking at the notes, but I really like it.
I like it too, because I really love this word painting, and that was the main goal I wanted to achieve with this piece. Because Maeht's poem, we just call him Maeght, is very, very. It's full of pictures. It speaks in a very interesting language, so and makes you imagine what really happens and how it looks and how it feels. And I wanted to rather emphasize that than having some enormous musical artwork that completely loses the words, which are the base of all this.
Mm-hmm. When you're making art like this, it's really important to focus on what the priority is, and in this case, making the priority the lyrics was a great choice, I thought.
Yeah, it's a great poem.
Mm-hmm. Well,
and very interesting to work with.
Oh yeah, absolutely, I bet. Well, that's about all I wanted to say about this one, unless you have any last remarks you'd like to make.
Yes, I would really like to go into the very first part, which you skipped, the intro.
Oh yes, I did. I'm so sorry.
There were a few things that went into this as well. The musically educated folks among our listeners might be interested to hear that we start actually on the 5 chord, on the dominant of A minor,
mm-hmm.
and we're not starting on the home chord. The thought behind that was that the intro covers the story that happens before the actual poem. So there's a group of fighters and healers, and they're hunting and throwing the music right into the action by starting on the 5 chord also emphasizes that there is something going on and it's hectic and something happens and it's wild, and the group falls. And that sets the stage for the rescue party, for the lurker itself, to overcome his or her self-doubt.
Interesting. So let me jump in there just for a second. So when he's talking about the home chord, he means this one. Oh, hang on. Yep. So we're in A minor here, but the first chord is actually this one. Yeah, I really like that intro as well. I didn't think to talk about it. So this is actually portraying the people that end up getting rescued. Really cool. I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah, I think that's interpretation that's difficult to see when you didn't come up with the meaning of that yourself. Mm-hmm. I think that I see why you skipped that.
Well, again, it's also because I just wanted to get straight into the lyrical part, because that's what I want to focus on. But like the intro, I guess I shouldn't just assume things because not everyone does this, but it does a really good job of setting up not only the home key but also the feel for the whole piece, in terms of there's constant tension pushing back and forth. Let's listen to the intro one more time just so that we can hear it again. one of the things that I didn't mention but has jumped out at me is that the rhythm is not entirely straightforward. You have all these little, they almost feel like hiccups. I mean, obviously the rhythm is intentional, but it sounds a little bit chaotic, like you would expect if you're portraying, say, a fight, especially a fight that's not going well.
And also there is always there's some at some points this fallen this small fragment of the melody is already in there.
I was just about to mention that, actually, that you're emphasizing the semitone here. It's right there. Yep.
Yeah, that is a hint at what might happen, or what is happening right now, which doesn't get explained until after.
Mm-hmm. By the way, just this one little part here, the C, D, E, F, A, G sharp, you could turn that into the main melody of any piece, and it would be like a great piece by itself. It's a really great melodic fragment there. Anyway, but yeah, for any aspiring composers, that semitone, like F to E, or like B flat to A, whatever you want to say, that semitone is one of the most emotionally laden intervals, if that makes any sense. It just feels like a sigh, like someone mourning something. It's powerful.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you for pointing that out. I feel bad that I didn't spend more time on
it. No worries. I totally understand why you didn't see that and why you didn't get everything I put into this piece, because there's a whole lot. And I guess I even forgot some things I thought when I wrote this.
But again, that's one of the fun things about composing, is you can start from your own way of interpreting it and write something that people interpret differently, and that's fine as long as they're getting something out of it. That's the way I feel about it. Yeah,
and I wouldn't say you could be wrong, you could be different in your interpretation. If this whole piece means something completely different to you, that's totally fine.
Cool.
Music is subjective.
I love that. That's a great way of putting that. Nicely done. All right. Well, I think that's actually a great place to leave that there, if you're okay, because I would love to hear what you think about my piece Home, because it's one of the ones that I'm most proud of, but it's also probably one of my more complicated pieces.
Yeah, I really hope I can draw something from it, knowing that it is one of the pieces that have been on your list for quite some time to talk about, and being one of the more complicated stuff. I think you'll have to guide me through it a bit, but we'll make it work.
So here's what I would recommend. I would suggest don't spend too much time talking about like the really technical aspects of stuff unless there's something that really, really excites you. Just take a more general view of it, and I can dive into the more details if you'd like.
That's totally fine.
I came back to Clanlord after a almost 10-year-long break in 2019, and was so excited that, this place that I'd grown up with was still around, that I wanted to write music to celebrate that. Also, the music that I had from 10 years ago wasn't as good as what I could do nowadays. So I decided that I would write something just to really celebrate coming home, and this is the piece that I came up with. All right, let's take a listen through it.
That's so cool.
I'm really proud of that one. That ended up turning out exactly as I'd hoped.
And you should be proud.
Mm-hmm. Oh man, I have so many things that I could say about this, but I'd love to hear what you'd have to say.
When I write music, you often talk about contrast. Mm-hmm. And I think this is also a piece of contrast while maintaining certain parts of it throughout the whole piece, like the harp accompaniment. But you find different ways to contrast this piece with itself, mm-hmm. the separate parts. And I think that's something very, very cool. You start off by only the melody or this motif, mm-hmm. Which goes through the single instruments and then ends up in this accompaniment by the harp that doesn't really leave us throughout the piece, but shifts into different directions. Just like you said earlier, you have crazy harmonics going on. You showed me the notes, and it looks clean from the start, and then you start using the flats and the sharps, and things get thrown around, and that's crazy, and really, really deserves a deep dive as soon as we make our first video episode.
Sounds good. Can I jump in for just a sec?
Yeah, sure. Of course.
So I was gonna say, actually, the intro was really hard to make. It didn't exist until I was mostly done the piece.
That's interesting.
It sort of came out because I couldn't think of anything else. But yeah, in my head, I started with the accompaniment, which I think I can play for you right over here. Like, this was the very first thing that appeared in my head. And I know, I really liked it so much, I wanted to keep coming back, so I ended up using what's called the rondo form, which is basically where you have that section, usually with the main melody, which I believe starts here. So that sort of melody comes back, and then in between times when I use that melody, there's what are called episodes or other sections where it's contrasting. So I always knew that I wanted to keep coming back to that, and it wasn't originally supposed to be in different keys, but it just sort of turned out that way. But again, the piece, when you're writing a piece, sometimes it leads you in directions you aren't expecting, and you just sort of have to go with it.
Also, what stands out to me is you really paint a picture of woven instruments. The flutes are woven into each other, and at some points they separate, but they come together very, very quickly afterwards. And yeah, it flows throughout the piece, and that's the feeling I get when I listen to it, and I get a Baroque feeling, mm-hmm. because the flutes are clearly related, but they are not the same, and they separate and they come together in a very flowing way, which makes me think of Baroque instrumental or Renaissance vocal music.
You're right on the nose there. Actually, for any music students out there, you might have had to learn species counterpoint when you were in second year theory or whatever. And there's all these rules about it, like thirds are good, parallel fifths are not. And yeah. I've tried to follow a lot of those rules, but every so often I break them. And I mean, the nice thing is that now that I'm writing and I'm not being judged on it, or graded, I should say, I can do whatever I want. But I think that is the thing that I'm most proud of. When I talk about counterpoint as a class, I have to admit most of my music student friends hated it because it's very complicated. Like, the rules seem arbitrary, but I loved it. I was like, oh, this is a puzzle I can figure out. how all the things fit together. And then, 5 years later or whatever, I was trying to write horn lines for jazz arrangements, and a lot of the rules still apply. It's just there's some things that are different, like you're supposed to use more dissonance for jazz-related things. But anyway, can I play just a little bit of the flute melodies to start?
Sure.
So I originally used two of the same flutes, bone flutes, and they just didn't sound different enough when they were playing the same notes. So I ended up using bone and reed flutes just so you could really grasp when they're playing the same note at the same time. But, there's that sense of differentness. Anyway, let's take a listen. Sorry, just one tiny little thing there. When I had the reed flute join in originally, you couldn't hear it add in at all. That's why I had to add in that little tiddly bit so you could actually even hear it starting at all. So I really like your observation about the fact that they have these parts where they're rhythmically not in sync for a while, but then they find their way back. That was something I always intended to do as well.
And it's so powerful because it keeps the music interesting while showing those lines are connected and they're meant to be together. Mm-hmm. And that portrays that very, very nicely.
Awesome. Thank you.
It's your work, so thank you.
Okay. Did you want to go into anything next, or do you want me to say something? Do you care about?
Yes, I'll leave the harmonic part. I'll leave to you because I think that's easier for you.
Sure. Okay.
Okay. So one thing. Mm-hmm. Yeah, one thing I'd love to talk about, the part where you start with the dotted notes in 3/4, and you kind of laugh at the listener by making him feel like they're triplets, but there aren't. I had to laugh there internally because you're almost laughing in the face of the listener because there's something they hear but isn't there.
Oh yeah, I have so much fun over here, man. So he's talking about. Let's go through the piece. So we have our first A section.
Yeah.
And then I have this sort of contrasting section, which is all designed to give the harp a chance to shine, but also it causes us to modulate from G to F, which is not a closely related key, but it works, so I don't care. Anyway, so we have the same section happens here again, but again we're starting in F, and then we go to... Where do we go? Oh right, this is the first sort of episode. This is the part where it's... Actually, why did I stop that? So this first episode has two contrasting sections. The first has almost that little tiny sense of loneliness you were talking about from your piece, where the instruments are more separated. The harp plays this very, very sparse thing, which is in contrast to its... And actually, this is the first time that it stops that continual motion. Anyway. This actually started from the harp part, and I added in the flute parts afterwards. But this is the part you were talking about right over here. Anyway, that harp part is, the fancy term for that is hemiola, where you're alternating 6/8 and 3/4 time. At least that's the English we're used to that word. So it sounds like this. And what am I'm going from D major, I think, to F major, which are two chords that don't go together at all. But you know what? They both have A in them, so. It's
close enough.
I know it's what is it, like a pivot note modulation?
I don't remember.
Don't even worry.
I just do stuff now.
That's fine.
I don't know how to name it. I just do stuff.
Welcome to my life. I don't remember the terms either. And this is where the flutes are also sort of doing their own thing, but they're still more connected than they were in the last section. And then this part is... And that's where I really, really like what I did, because I get to use a little tiny bit of that sort of B section from the harp. I think it's actually this one. Does that sound familiar? Because it should sound an awful lot like... So I was actually quoting that over here. I actually tried to put more quotes in there, but it didn't fit properly. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So why did this part jump out at you? Other than I was laughing at the audience, because I kind of was.
As you know by now, I'm a rhythmic freak, and I really love when composers play with rhythms and do something that's not expected or feels a bit odd, or you don't really know where to put it. That stood out to me. And while having this rhythmic part, there's this melody which is now contrasting in a different way we haven't been talking about yet, because the first flute goes into very, very high octaves while the second flute stays on the known level. There's a new way of contrasting you introduce here. I think you didn't go that high, that long. Oh, you did. But the second flute did also follow a bit. So yeah, I think that's a new contrast.
Yeah, I definitely I think I use that only at the very, very intro. Nope, that one. Compared to, yeah, it's still not quite even as far apart as you were talking about. Yeah, whenever you're trying to write music, coming up with contrasting sections can always be really tricky, because you want to make them feel different enough that they're interesting, while not feeling so different that they don't belong. And I feel like this is right on the border of what counts as it's still part of the piece. And I think what excuses it is that I'm still doing a similar-ish things with the flute in terms of the harmony, the counterpoint, and that sort of makes up for the massive change in the accompaniment, I guess is how I'd describe it.
Mm-hmm. Also, I think of the whole piece, you're doing a great job of finding the right balance. At least I always feel like you have to find the right spot between you're doing too much and you're doing not enough when writing music. So not enough in terms of you should have something the audience can feel and go with and listen to and interpret. If the music is just one line of music and there's not much happening, that gets boring. And doing too much is something like there's too much going on. There's too many rhythmic changes. There's too much going on at the same time. And I think you're in a perfect spot, maybe more on the too much side, but not too much yet, when it comes to how much is happening at the same time. You're right at the spot where for the educated listeners, there is a lot going on, and you can go into so many facets of this piece while listening to it, and you'll have to re-listen to get another facet. And while being there, it's not too much for the listeners who just want to listen and don't care about crazy harmonic changes and rhythmics and stuff. They just want to enjoy it. And I think you're right on the spot here.
Oh, thank you. That actually is something that really matters to me. In my brain, I think about the idea of lasting appeal versus immediate appeal. So for my example, I might choose like Bohemian Rhapsody by Queen. When it first came out, everybody hated it. Nobody liked it at all. And part of the reason is that there's so much going on there. It's like you're talking about. If you do too much, people get confused and then get bored. If you don't do enough, people just get bored. So with Bohemian Rhapsody, people really only started to appreciate it after they'd had time to sort of acclimatize to it, to get used to it, and sort of give themselves time to accept that. With this piece, there's lots and lots of things going on, and for this one, I really wanted there to be a lot, so even if you're listening to it for the 5th time, there's still something that you can track down in there that maybe you haven't heard before, or maybe you're asking yourself, how did he do that? Or why did he do that? But again, if it's your first time, then it's just, oh yeah, it sounds pretty. And again, I don't mean that as a disparaging thing. It's important for things to sound pretty. People won't give your music the time to appreciate those more detailed things unless it has that immediate appeal as well.
Yeah, perfect example is when we talk historically, expressionistic music in expressionism. There's a lot going on. There are rules they follow and stuff, and it's great music to analyze, but it's not great music to listen to.
Yeah, I know. That's always been a question. Like, how do you get people to want to listen to your music?
Make it complicated.
Oh, there we go. How well did that work out for the 20th century types? Oh no. Yeah, I went there. Eat it, Schoenberg.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, and Berg and
yeah, I know. I mean, there's
and that's confusing as well. Having Schoenberg and Alban Berg. For those who know, Arnold Schoenberg, Alban Berg.
Anyway, let's not open that can of worms right
now. It's not fun to open that anyway. So
yeah, okay. But yeah, getting back to this piece, one of the ways that I tried to give that sense of immediate appeal is to reuse that main melody. So even if people are getting lost, they can be like, "Oh wait, I remember this now." But it's coming back in a different key, so it's still kind of interesting. And for the people who are listening on their 7th occasion, they can be like, oh, wait, how's he going to get back from B flat to G major or something like that? So, which was
with
that
perfect pitch, obviously.
Yeah.
Which I don't have, sadly. Oh, depends on the situation.
Yeah, I think that's actually. Oh my gosh, I said that as a joke, but that's actually where we are. Sorry, let me just play this for 1 sec. Here we go. Oh, sorry, this is actually the ending. I thought we were still at this part. My mistake. I skipped way too far ahead. Here's B flat. No, my mistake. E flat major. Oh, I just went back there. I didn't do anything clever. I'm sure it's clever. I just have to analyze it. But yeah, so here's a little trick for you. If you're having trouble getting out of your key, just repeat one note over and over again and have the accompaniment drop out and then come back in again. You get away with anything. Anyway, so oh wow, we've been talking for about an hour now. So I'll just go through the ending really quickly if you don't mind, because I'd love to talk about that a bit.
Yes, please.
So after that big build-up part that you were talking about, we pull it back down to just the flutes, and then back to just one flute, and then we go back to the very, very beginning, but now the flutes are playing during the very initial part. And then we're back into the main melody. And then this is the same transition as before, but wait, it goes somewhere different. And then again, it's the same melody again, but now we're in B flat major. This modulation by thirds is pretty fun. And then this part, so you walk down from B flat to G minor. Oh, A flat major 9. For anyone not paying attention, it's this G minor chord, G. But then if you put an A flat under it, you get this major sounding chord even though you're using that same minor chord as before. So minor chord, major but slightly dissonant chord, minor chord again, major slightly dissonant, minor, and then we walk up again, and this time when we walk back down we go to G major instead of G minor. And then it sounds like the melody's coming back, but instead we walk up to that really high note, and then of course we got this lovely slow down ending with one of the first Corey fake out endings. And if I did it nowadays, I'd probably make you wait twice as long.
Oh, wait a second. Let us wait a second time.
A double fake out? I love it.
Yeah.
Oh,
okay, man. I'll be prepared for that over the when you play the next song you freshly wrote.
I mean, I've been planning to write some more ones. Now I know how to end both of them. Fantastic. But yeah, that sort of delayed ending where I go back and forth between those two chords really helped to take the momentum of the piece that had really been driving forward the whole time and just cause it to sort of slow down just harmonically. It really feels like it's the end of the day. Things are winding down to some extent. People are going to bed, or I don't know, whatever you want, however you want to think about it. But that's the idea that I had in my head.
That's really cool. And
yeah, I think I'd love to get into all the complicated little details, because there's for people who are actually music writers, there's some interesting little modulations there. This is a piece that I've tried to transpose for real instruments, and it's been quite challenging to do, and I'm hoping I can get it finished at some point ever. So if you want to look at the notes, let me know.
I'd love to.
Cool. All right. Well, I think that's all I have to say about this piece, unless there's anything you want to finish with.
No, I'm just glad we talked about it, because I think that's one of the pieces where you can hear there's a lot going on, but having the composer talk about it makes it so much deeper than before. And I'll listen to it with different ears next time you play it, and you should play it more often.
Well, whenever I can find 2 other bards, I probably will. Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for listening to this one. It's been a lot of fun to talk about these 2 pieces. If you have any suggestions for pieces you'd like us to do a deep dive on, whether by us or by other bards, please do let us know. And yeah, other than that, once again, I've been Chris Coriakin, and
I've been Semi and Bingro.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. Have a lovely night. Bye for now. Or morning, I should say.
Goodbye.
Right, bye for now. So this is... Ow, I just punched myself in the head. Why did I do that?
Oh.
I was trying to scratch my head. Instead, I elbowed my headset, my headphones. Anyway. Fantastic. Good job. I'm beating myself up.